Well, there are
supplements.
people who basically lived on meat.
Yeah.
You know, the Inuit did, the Maasai basically did. I mean, there's some supplementation, but not a lot.
Welcome back. If we haven't met before, then hi, I'm Goji Man. I'm currently studying for a Master's in Nutrition and qualifying as a nutritionist. And next year I'll be studying for a PhD in nutritional science. I do lots of plant-based nutrition videos, so smash that subscribe button if you are interested in improving your health or reversing any specific health problems. So I want to tell you a quick story before I get to Jordan's interview, as I had the same problem as him, but the things I learned along the way to help me regain my health, he has not come across yet. And because of this, he is making decisions based on only 50% of the necessary information. So in May 2013, I was just finishing a long course of antibiotics. Up to that point, I'd never had any real health issues, and I was eating a wide varied diet and never had any food issues, and I certainly never had any mental health issues. So just as I was finishing the antibiotics, I started reacting to absolutely everything. I would eat foods and I would be crippled in bed for days with irregular heartbeat, severe anxiety and panic attacks, like the worst you could ever experience. They were just horrible. I was a mess. I lost so much weight. I had about 20 different symptoms, and this carried on for 3 years, day in, day out. So as I started to monitor the foods that I was eating, I very quickly noticed that the foods that should be nourishing, so broccoli, spinach, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, etc., they would put me in a world of pain. And these reactions would go on for weeks or months at a time, and I would literally sleep for 10 to 14 hours a day. Now stay with me here because I'm building up to Jordan Peterson's depression and his other health problems and how I know what the root cause of his depression is. So I started eliminating foods that I was reacting to and would then notice that I would react to other foods. It was absolutely insane. I got to the stage where I was reacting to everything, and I was even considering doing what Jordan did and eating only meat. Now imagine that mindset when you're a vegan. But then I discovered the whole root cause of all of this through a lot of research and speaking to some experts, and I knew at that point depression and anxiety are symptoms of things happening downstream in the body, and they are not actually the disease itself. So when you damage the gut badly, and I promise you this is not a leaky gut anecdote, so when you damage the gut badly like I did with antibiotics or other medications, or you have a gut bug or a poor diet, you cause massive amounts of inflammation in the gut and you lose the ability to process chemicals in the food such as oxalates, histamine, salicylates and sulfur, for example. And this is a massive, massive problem. So for example, when you cause gut trauma with antibiotics, you can wipe out Oxalobacter fermenges, which is the bacteria that degrades oxalates so that the body can actually process these oxalates. Otherwise they can become extremely toxic. And the problem is when you lose these bacteria from the gut, it is very difficult to get them back. So I was eating all of these incredibly healthy foods such as sweet potatoes and spinach, and I thought I was literally dying. I kid you not. So if you think of the gut in terms of an inflammation bucket, when you damage the gut, chemicals such as oxalates and salicylates, which were fine before, now add to the inflammation load and the bucket becomes full, and you start experiencing wide-ranging symptoms as those chemicals are not being processed properly and are getting into your bloodstream. And when they get into the bloodstream in high amounts, this will cause wide-ranging issues from irregular heartbeats, depression, autoimmune problems, etc, etc. And I promise you this, in the next 10 years we will learn that the vast majority of anxiety and depression and many other illnesses and autoimmune problems are caused by gut inflammation. There is already so much science now pointing in this direction, so please read The Inflamed Mind by Professor Edward Bullmore, especially if you have any mental health issues. So now let's jump into Jordan's story and see what he had to say about the meat-only diet curing his depression and other health problems. So here Jordan is talking about his daughter who has many of the same health problems as him, such as depression and autoimmune issues, and his wife started to suspect a dietary problem.
It was bloody bleak, I'll tell you. And my wife always had a suspicion that this was dietary related, you know, and
Why?
Well, we did notice that when Michaela was young, if she ate oranges or strawberries, that she'd get a rash. Like there were, and then when she developed arthritis, if she ate oranges in particular, that would definitely cause a flare. It was the only thing we could see. The problem is that in order to identify a dietary component, the response has to be pretty quick after you eat the thing. Like if it's 2 days later, how the hell are you going to figure that out?
Right.
A lot of these responses appear to be delayed for 4 days.
So just keep this in your mind, both oranges and strawberries are high or very high in salicylates, oxalates and histamines. And also notice what he said about the reactions. Some of the reactions were often days later, so it was difficult to track. Now keep in mind the inflammation bucket that I discussed and also my own personal reactions that were often days later, but let's keep this going. Next up, he talks about his daughter when she is older at university and how she realises that certain foods were causing her symptoms. And when she removes the foods, she gets a relief in her symptoms.
Anyways, Michaela noticed about 3 years ago, no more than that now, 5 years ago, she was at Concordia University and struggling with her illness and all the associated problems. She noticed that around exam time, she was starting to develop real skin problems. And my cousin's daughter, who I mentioned, had really bad skin problems and wounds that wouldn't heal. And that was partly part of the process that eventually killed her. And she thought, oh, it must be stress. And then she thought, wait a second, I really changed my diet. When I'm studying, all I do is eat bagels. All I do is eat bread, sandwiches. She thought, maybe it's the bread. So she cut out gluten first. And it had a remarkable effect, like a really remarkable effect. And then she went on a radical elimination diet all the way down to nothing but chicken and broccoli. And then her symptoms started to drop off one by one.
Now, if you have a lot of gut inflammation and you remove the driving factors of inflammation from the diet, it is normal that you will get a widespread relief in symptoms. Again, keep this in mind, but here you need to understand that this is a gut problem and not the foods themselves that are the issue. But let's keep this going as all will become apparent. So Jordan then goes on to say that his own depression would be up and down depending on the foods that he was eating.
And so although I was getting better physically in a variety of ways, like radical ways, I was really having a bitch of a time regulating my mood, and I was having sporadic, really negative reactions to food when I ate something I shouldn't. So that took about 1.5 years to clear up, and I was still really anxious in the morning up to 3 months ago, like horribly, and then it would get better all day.
Again, keep this in your mind what he is saying, because we are building up a picture here that will become clearer and clearer as we go through the video. Next up, he talks about his daughter eliminating foods and the severe reaction she would get when she reintroduced them.
Anyways, her depression went away. All these symptoms went away, and like radically.
So what changed her from chicken and broccoli to carnivore?
Well, she kept experimenting, and she got very sensitive to all sorts of foods in the aftermath of that too. So this is why I wouldn't recommend that anybody does this casually, because we don't understand much about it. But the upshot was that, well, she kept experimenting, and she started to add things back and take them away. And sometimes when she added things, the results were devastating. She was like done for a month. She ate the wrong thing, done for a month.
Now again, what did he say? Well, the reactions were so bad until she removed the fruits and vegetables from her diet. Keep taking those mental notes with you.
All the symptoms came back, the depression came back. She thought that her whole dietary theory was wrong because it lasted so long and was so extreme. And it's like it took her 2 years to figure out that really what she could eat was beef and greens, and then she figured out that she could only eat beef.
So the greens themselves.
So it was the greens that were causing her problems, and again, what are greens high in? Oxalates, histamines and salicylates. So just keep thinking about that inflammation bucket. Next up, Jordan discusses the resolution of his own symptoms when he went meat only. Pay particular attention to when he talks about his own mental health and when it got worse when he was eating certain foods that he shouldn't have been eating.
What happened? Okay, so 2 years ago she said, Dad, you have to try this diet because you have a lot of the same symptoms as me. Now, I didn't have arthritis, but I had a lot of the other symptoms. And I thought, oh, Christ, okay, Michaela, I can try anything for a month. She said, try it for a month. I thought, okay, whatever. I can hang by my fingernails from the windowsill for a month. It's like, it's just not that big a deal. And so I went on a really low carb diet. Okay, so this is what happened. I had gastric reflux disorder, and I was snoring quite a lot. I stopped snoring the first week. I thought, what the hell? That's supposed to be associated with weight loss. Because I had gained some weight. I weighed about 212 pounds, and I'm about 6'1½", so that was my maximum weight. I stopped snoring, which was a great relief to Tammy. So that just quit, and that's a big deal, right? Because if you snore, you have sleep apnea, and then you don't sleep right, and it's like not a good thing. Okay, next. I started waking up in the mornings. I'd never been able to wake up in the mornings my whole life. I always had to stumble to the shower, and then maybe I could wake up. It took me an hour, and I felt terrible. And so all of a sudden I woke up and it was like, oh, look at that. I'm awake in the morning and I'm clear-headed and things aren't gloomy and horrible. It's like, well, isn't that weird? Then I lost 7 pounds the first month. I thought, 7 pounds, that's a lot in a month. And I'd already gone for a whole year on a sugar-free diet and I didn't lose any weight. And I'd been exercising.
Sugar-free, but did you cut out bread and
No,
gluten?
no, it was just no desserts, no sugar, no. And I thought that might do it. Didn't make any difference at all. 7 pounds. Well, then I lost 7 pounds the next month. Then I lost 7 pounds the next month. I lost 7 pounds every month for 7 months. It's like I had to throw away all my clothes. I went back to the same weight that I was when I was 26. And my psoriasis disappeared. And I had floaters in my right eye and they cleared up. And then the last thing that went away for me, I was still having a bitch of a time with mood regulation. And that sucked because when I changed my diet, I didn't respond to antidepressants properly anymore. They weren't working. And so although I was getting better physically on a variety of ways, like radical ways, I was really having a bitch of a time regulating my mood, and I was having sporadic, really negative reactions to food when I ate something I shouldn't.
Now, we know from the science that meat is inflammatory in the body, but if you have gut inflammation already and you are loading up on that inflammation further with oxalates, histamines and salicylates, you will get a massive improvement in the symptoms when you simply remove these foods from your diet. But here you have to remember 2 things. Number 1, meat is not good for you for inflammation. And number 2, getting a massive improvement in symptoms doesn't mean that fruits and vegetables are bad for you. It just simply means that you have an inability to digest and metabolize them properly because of the gut issues and inflammation in your body. Now, the more I listened to Jordan's story, the more it resonated with mine. Now, listen to what he said after he tried apple cider vinegar, which is obviously very high in histamines and salicylates, after he had been on a restricted diet for a period of time.
About people doing this.
Well, I have a negative story.
Okay.
Okay. One of the things that both Michaela and I noticed was that when we restricted our diet and then ate something we weren't supposed to, the reaction to eating what we weren't supposed to was absolutely catastrophic.
What did you do? What did you switch to? Or what did you eat, rather?
Well, the worst response, I think we're allergic to, or allergic, whatever the hell this is, having an inflammatory response to something called sulfites. And we had some apple cider that had sulfites in it, and that was really not good. Like, I was done for a month. That was the first time I talked to Sam Harris.
You were done for a month?
Oh, yeah. It took me out for a month. It was awful.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say,
so,
look.
So this is right before this whole truth conversation with Sam Harris that got stuck in the mud. During.
So
I
think the day I talked to Sam was like the worst day of my life. Not because of talking to Sam, but it was
just physically.
Oh, Jesus, I was so dead. But I didn't want to not do it. Because
apple cider, like what was it doing?
Sulfites in it.
What was it doing to you?
Oh, it produced an overwhelming sense of impending doom. And I seriously mean overwhelming. Like, there's no way I could have lived like that if that would have lasted for... See, Michaela knew by that point that it would probably only last a month, and I was like...
A month?
Yeah,
from
a month.
Fucking cider?
I had very similar reactions to this, and it was simply because my gut was so compromised that I just couldn't process the foods properly. It's not that all of these fruits and vegetables were specifically bad for him. Next up, the interview took the usual Rogan vegan line, in that there are people who have lived on meat-only diets and that dietary cholesterol doesn't raise blood cholesterol, yada, yada, yada.
I want your blood profile. I want to find out what's going on with you, because one of the big misconceptions when it comes to cholesterol and saturated fat and food is that if you eat dietary cholesterol, that it affects your blood cholesterol levels. It's not. It's a super common misconception.
Well, so the thing about clinical studies with diet are virtually impossible to conduct, because you just can't conduct a proper, randomly distributed, controlled experiment. It's too hard. So a lot of what we're trying to do is pull out information from correlations.
Right.
You can't do it.
So while we know this is all absolute utter garbage, I just want to put context around mine and Jordan's story. Now, you will often hear paleo people and even keto vegan folks say that they felt so much better when they removed fruits and vegetables from their diets. But here, these people need to take a step back and say, well, why are certain fruits and vegetables making me feel tired, anxious, or depressed? Or why was my bloating so high on a high-carb vegan diet? Because if you are bloating or anxious after eating certain foods, then it's your body telling you that something simply isn't right. And the answer shouldn't be just to remove those foods, it should be about finding the cause of those issues. A very good example to illustrate this point is that up to 75% of people with IBS have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO as it's known. So basically they have bacteria in the small intestines where it shouldn't be, and the carbs you eat then ferment, causing bloating and pain. Now, does this mean that carbs are bad? No, it just simply means that you have a gut issue, making it very difficult for you to digest the carbohydrates. So what's the solution? Well, you can go to your doctor and get tested for SIBO and take antibiotics or natural antimicrobials if you are not keen on pharmaceuticals, so that you fix the underlying problem and you can then properly digest the carbohydrates. Or you can simply remove the carbohydrates from your diet and assume that they are bad or just simply don't agree with you. And for me, that's a very worrying tack to take, especially if you want long-term health. Whenever you have any health issues, take a food diary and look for patterns to see what foods are triggering your symptoms. And then do your research on the food to see what the potential problem could be. Don't just simply remove food or food groups from your diet, because the more you do this, the more you're likely to experience further food reactions. All health stems from and originates from the gut. Simply believing that depression is a chemical imbalance in the brain when it can't even be tested for is a very, very naive approach from the medical profession and the pharmaceuticals that have preyed upon this for many, many years. Just before I finish up, listen to what Dr. Greger says about the effectiveness of antidepressants.
A recent meta-analysis has sparked huge scientific and public controversy by stating that the placebo effect can explain the apparent clinical effectiveness of antidepressants. But wait a second, aren't there clinical trials providing compelling evidence for antidepressant effectiveness? In fact, thousands of them? If a meta-analysis just compiles all the best published research, how could it say they don't work much better than sugar pills? The key word is published. What if a drug company decided only to publish studies that showed a positive effect, but quietly shelved and concealed any studies showing the drug didn't work? If you didn't know any better, you'd look at the published medical literature and be like, wow, this drug is great. And what if all the drug companies did it? To find out if this was the case, researchers applied to the FDA under the Freedom of Information Act to get access to the published and unpublished studies submitted by pharmaceutical companies, and what they found was shocking. According to the published literature, the results of nearly all the trials on antidepressants were positive. They work. In contrast, FDA analysis of the trial data showed that only roughly half of the trials had positive results. In other words, about half the studies showed the drugs didn't work. Thus, when published and unpublished data are combined, they fail to show a clinically significant advantage for antidepressant medication over a sugar pill.
The reason that they don't work is that for most the problem is downstream, and until you resolve that issue, you will never fix the depression. And this is often the same for many other diseases. You either get to the root cause of the disease and fix it, or you mask these symptoms with dangerous pharmaceuticals. So that's the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed. As always, if you have a question for me, then hashtag AskGojiman in the comments below, and I'll choose one of these questions to answer in my next video for you. And as always, remember to look after your body, because it's the only place you have to live. And I'll see you next time.